Well, so you're saying that for now, Xi Jinping has not felt the AGI, but it feels like the DeepSeek moment might, like, there might be meetings going on now where he's going to start wearing the same T-shirt and things are going to escalate.
I mean, this, he may have woken up last week, right? Lian Feng met the the second command guy, and they had a meeting. And then the next day, they announced the AI subsidies, which are 1 trillion RMB, right?
So it's possible that this DeepSeek moment is truly the beginning of a Cold War.
That's what a lot of people are worried about. People in AI have been worried that this is going towards a Cold War, or already is.
But it's not DeepSeek's fault, but there's something, a bunch of factors came together where it was like this explosion. I mean, it all has to do with Nvidia stock going down, probably. But it's just some mass hysteria that happened that eventually led to Xi Jinping having meetings and waking up to this idea.
And the U.S. government realized in October 7th, 2022, before ChatGPT released, that restriction on October 7th, which dropped and shocked everyone, and it was very clearly aimed at AI. Everyone was like, what the heck are you doing?
Stable Diffusion was out then, but not ChatGPT.
Yeah, but not ChatGPT.
So it was like starting to be rumblings
of what Gen AI can do to society, but it was very clear, I think, to at least like National Security Council and those sort of folks that this was where the world is headed, this Cold War that's happening.
So is there any concerns that the export controls push China to take military action on Taiwan?
This is the big risk, right? The further you push China away from having access to cutting edge American and global technologies, the more likely they are to say, well, because I can't access it, I might as well, like, no one should access it, right? And there's a few like interesting aspects of that, right? Like, China has a urban-rural divide like no other. They have a male-female birth ratio like no other, to the point where, if you look in most of China, it's like the ratio's not that bad, but when you look at single dudes in rural China, it's like a 30-to-1 ratio. Mm-hmm. And those are disenfranchised dudes, right? Like, quote unquote, like the US has an incel problem, like China does too. It's just they're placated in some way or crushed down. What do you do with these people? And at the same time, you're not allowed to access the most important technology. At least the US thinks so. China's maybe starting to think this is the most important technology by starting to dump subsidies in it, right? They thought EVs and renewables were the most important technology. They dominate that now, right? Now they started thinking about semiconductors in, the late 2010s and early 2020s. And now they've been dumping money and they're catching up rapidly. And they're going to do the same with AI, right? Because they're very talented, right? So the question is like, when does this hit a breaking point, right? And if China sees this as, hey, they can continue, if not having access and starting a true hot war, right, taking over Taiwan or trying to subvert its democracy in some way or blockading it, hurts the rest of the world far more than it hurts them, this is something they could potentially do, right? And so is this pushing them towards that? Potentially, right? I'm not quite a geopolitical person, but it's obvious that the world regime of peace and like trade is like super awesome for economics, but at some point it could break, right?
I think we should comment that why Chinese economy would be hurt by that is that they're export heavy. I think the United States buys so much, like if that goes away, like that's how their economy.
Well, also they just like would not be able to import raw materials from like all over the world, right? Mm-hmm. The US would just shut down the Strait of Malacca, and like, at the same time, the US you could argue almost all the GDP growth in America since, the 70s has been either population growth or tech, right? Because, your life today is not that much better than someone from the 80s outside of tech, right? You still, cars, they all have semiconductors in them everywhere. Fridges, semiconductors everywhere. There's these funny stories about how Russians were taking apart laundry machines because they had certain like Texas Instrument chips that they could then repurpose and put into like their anti-missile things, right? Like their S-400 or whatever. You would know more about this, but there's all sorts of like everything about semiconductors is so integral to every part of our lives.